Jason.
What is it this time, Andrew?
Did you know that I've become the heir presumptive to the earldom of Annandale and Hart?
Andrew, I know for a fact that you grew up on the eastern shore of Maryland, and this is a lie.
Dear boy, then please explain these ruins in my back garden.
Andrew, did you take a photo of an inflatable castle and put a filter on it?
Yes, I did, and now I must away to join the House of Lords.
Wherever you are, whenever you are, here we are with another episode of Seemingly Unrelated, the show where Professor Dr. Mr. Sir Andrew Johnstone knows a lot. I do not, and Naomi is somewhere in the middle, usually depending on what year the reference is from. I am Jason Heat, co-host of this fine expedition. I am a award-winning writer, director, producer, and a soon-to-be award-winning, I hope, professional wrestling commentator and creative. Of course, I'm the co-pilot, which means we need a pilot because this ship does not fly on auto. Dr. Professor, please introduce yourself.
Yes, Dr. Andrew Johnstone, King's College London, Digital Asset Management, I want to say, is my title.
And we would be nothing without the third leg of our tripod, because you can't stand on two legs if you're a tripod. Try it. It doesn't work. Naomi, our producer, editor, and Gen Z ambassador, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Lovely to see you on this fine Tuesday, because we're visual now, so you can see us. Actually, we can't see you.
Some of us have to do our hair.
Honestly, this is not a fair dynamic because you can see us and we can't see you. So we're just imagining you, and hey, you look great. Did you wash your hair today? It looks wonderful. If this is your first time joining us for the show, let's give you the very quick rundown. Basically, Dr. Mr. Professor Sir Johnstone is able to make connections about seemingly unrelated things through politics, history, society, and culture. He knows so many different facts and figures, but more than that, he is able to find the story beneath the story. If you like this show, please go to our Patreon and go ahead and donate $2 a month, and you get a special bonus episode. Also, like, subscribe, write a review, tell a friend. We're very happy to say that this is very true. We are increasing in listenership episode by episode, but we want this to storm the world like colonialism. No, we don't. We want this to be a positive message that is spread out to the whole audio universe. So please go ahead, like, subscribe, share, review, and, tell a human being you actually know that you enjoy Seemingly Unrelated.
Tell a human being you don't know. Walk up to strangers on the street and shake them. Just shake them.
I love that.
So, Andrew, what is the journey today?
Jason, can you remember, reach back in your mind, what was the first filter you used on Instagram?
I don't have any. I have used filters legitimately maybe under 10 times.
You don't know, you don't put filters on your photos. You don't have a sienna or a...
No, listen, I'm a transparent person. I'm about honesty. I'm about reality. I'm an unvarnished truth kind of guy. I'm a probably don't really want to do that much work on Instagram kind of guy. Mm-hmm. I won't pretend that I haven't put filters on. I don't know their names. Like, one of them makes it look like old-timey West. I don't use that one. And anything that, I just use the one that makes it look more vibrant.
I actually don't think I know any of the names, but I also think, does anyone use filters anymore?
Oh, yes.
Because I remember when Instagram first started, I was in secondary school, and, we had specific apps that we'd download to, put filters over our pictures, and they looked terrible. And that was a style of picture back then. You wanted it to look it had a filter on.
The top 4 filters on Instagram. So this is to say, these are the filters used by the most popular posts on Instagram, right? So they've ranked all of their filters by like popularity. And the top 4 are: in 4th place, Sierra. Don't know what that means. In 3rd place, Valencia, which kind of adds like a golden hour vibe to it, like a sunset sunrise situation. Willow, and the number 1, Jason, the number 1 filter.
You explained the first 2 and then you just said Willow, and
I don't know what they are. I just know what Valencia is. I didn't look up what they do. I'm just like you, but in reverse. I know the names, but I don't know the functions. You know the functions, I don't know the names. But the most popular filter on Instagram by a country mile is normal, which is to say having no filter. Which is funny because, as we've already established, the point of Instagram initially was filters. That was the thing.
I thought the point of Instagram originally was document your life for the public constantly, and then eventually it turned to Reels. But at first it was really meant to be like Flickr, but for social media purposes.
See, and this is why we do this show, because you're wrong, and I've done the research.
Brutal.
Savage. Cool. No, the original function of Instagram, the way it came together was that the founders of Instagram wanted to bring the sophistication of professional photography and combine it with the ease of digital photography with the new smartphone platforms that emerged in 2006, 2007. As the main thrust behind it. So they were slightly ahead of the reason Instagram succeeded, they were just ahead of the curve. They were developing something and it hit the smartphone revolution at the same time and it took off. So they hired Cole Rise back in 2006, 2007, who was a professional photographer.
Cole Rise.
Great name.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a pro wrestling name.
Yeah, no, Cole Rise, he's a professional photographer. He's the guy who sort of translated the idea of professional photography into this amateur digital photos context. So that was like the thing that Instagram thought that they were going to do. Instead of you learning Photoshop and going through your digital photos and like adding textures and everything, it would just automatically add a filter and it would do a bunch of the work for you. So how does a filter work, Jason? Any ideas?
No, we are so far afield from anything that I think about on a daily basis. Like there are some days where you're like, what do you think about this? And it turns out it's about food. And I'm like, I know everything. And there's some days where you're like, what about history? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And I'm really curious. And today you're like, what about Instagram? And I'm like, it's just a meme of crickets chirping in my head as you talk.
I feel like this is my episode. I'm just sitting here like,
I know,
Instagram generation over here.
You have to understand, we're all products of our parents. My father is a professional dentist who I still think, if not to this day, at least within the last decade, refused to have a computer at his office and was still doing like carbon copying for receipts and physical files. I don't even like legitimately. So I have been a later adopter for a lot of these technologies than most people that I know. And I don't think it's necessarily conscious. It's just that I think that while I'm 8 million times more receptive than my father, there's just something that was passed down. So I didn't even sign, by the time I've signed up for one of these apps, they have long passed their peak. And now it's not a thing anymore. Like I didn't join Instagram until 2021.
Really?
Yeah, it was post-pandemic.
Wild.
So that's right. That's what I'm saying. So
when I moved to Manchester, I kept trying to add people on Facebook, and everyone was like, I don't have Facebook, because obviously everyone's annoying and cool. and I had to switch to Instagram. Do you know, I look back on some of my old stuff and it was embarrassing. Because you have to know the etiquette of the app, you know? And that's why I never joined Twitter or X now, because I don't know the app etiquette. So I feel like I'm going to make a twat out of myself.
If we want to talk about embarrassing as it relates to social media, in college, I was staunchly anti-Facebook, and I was also completely straight edge. Had never drank any alcohol, or I'd had like I had tried alcohol when I was 21. I was straight edge before then. I was quickly straight edge after that. It was a really fundamental part of my identity. And I remember having some kind of mental and emotional breakdown where I realized I just desperately needed to make a change. I wasn't happy. I was sad. I was depressed, or whatever it was. And my roommate, who was a much more free spirit than I was at one point like, well, then why don't you drink? And I was like, I can't do that. That's too big a step. I know I need to make changes. I know I need to grow and evolve, but I can't drink, blah, blah, blah. And so she just goes, all right, why don't you join Facebook? And I like crying broke down. It was like, okay, I'll join Facebook. And then I like, with tears in my eyes, literally signed up for a Facebook account, was so ashamed, deleted it, started it up the next day, and thus created an addiction that lasts until 2025. So literally I was such a late adopter to that I was doing it crying in the midst of a mental breakdown as opposed to turning to alcohol.
I love it. I love all of that. So I just said that the top filter is normal. What percentage of Gen Z, Jason, Naomi, you have to hold off on this one. You've got too much bias. But what percentage of Gen Z uses filters, like AR filters or lenses, on their social media posts? Not just on Instagram, but across all social media.
I don't know. Naomi literally put in my head earlier that perhaps this generation is less filter obsessed than ours, that the millennials were practicing the technology and the Gen Z has rejected it, and I guess Gen Alpha will turn it into a toilet. But
skibbity.
How many Gen Zers use filters? I will say 37%.
You're not far off. You're not. Yeah. Uh-oh, Naomi, what do you think?
I think TikTok, a lot of people use them because TikTok has like the base layer where you take a picture is actually filtered.
So we don't count the automatic ones because, one, people don't know they're doing this, but this is like people who say they have used a filter or a lens. From Gen Z, it comes in at about 44%. So Jason was close.
I'm
really
within
close.
some margin of error. I mean,
yeah, you were spot on, which is interesting to think about, because then we get to ask the question, okay, so rounded, it's just under half, it's around half, right? Half of all people on social media are like putting on a filter.
Well, you said half of all people or half of Gen Z?
Well, when you throw in the millennials, it goes a little bit up, as you noted. So it comes in about half of all people.
Okay.
But we're just getting some, this is what we have the data for. The millennial data, I got so many different numbers, I'm going to ignore it because sometimes it's like nobody uses it and everyone uses it. And it's like self-reported data. God damn it. But the Gen Z data is a little bit better on this because it's a thing that researchers care about right now. Nobody gives a shit about millennials anymore. We're washed. I'm 40. Nobody cares. I'm not even I haven't been in the Target demo for years.
It hurts.
So,
it hurts.
Who then uses filters?
My mother.
Does she?
No, she does. She doesn't understand why anyone needs to know about your life. Like,
I gotta tell you, kind of love it.
Legitimately.
Yeah.
She's like, why are you posting things on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
this is like that Rilo Kiley song. It's a hit where it's just like, no one's buying this shit, but I'll try selling it anyway.
It's but yeah, like, I don't know. Is it the older generation though that's using the filters, or is it the marketers? Is it specifically like people in an industry?
Yeah, it's interesting. The greatest or the most profound vector of identity for use of filters is class. Interestingly enough, Wealthy people significantly less likely to use filters.
Well, to be fair, they probably have better lighting in their very expensive homes.
Yeah, that's why. But also, poor people less likely to use filters, probably because they can't afford anything that they need to be able to execute this. It is a firmly middle class thing. There is this drive that exists in the middle to just... So if you're wealthy, and I think this also, by the way, explains why the no filter is the most popular. If you're wealthy, you don't need any filtering. You actually specifically don't want any filtering because the thing you're doing with social media is showing off. You're showing off the car, you're showing off the holiday, you're showing off the private jet, you're showing off the Balenciaga, you're showing off the Rolex, whatever it is. You're showing that your reality is so good that everyone else wants to
And
to
have
see
you
it.
seen that thing about like money can buy you beauty because people who like become rich and famous, their looks improve dramatically because they have the money to invest in looking good. Yeah.
Yes.
And time.
Time.
I mean,
And time. Because they've got the makeup artist and the hair and the fashion and the nutritionist and the personal trainer and the surgeon, all of it, all the things.
Well, also, money, I agree that like money can't buy you happiness. Fundamentally, if you're a person who is unhappy, money's not going to solve that. See the richest people in the world who consistently find ways to make themselves miserable. You know, like you still need to address your mental health issues and trauma. But what money does do generally is relieve stress. And relieving stress is a phenomenal way to get closer to happiness.
Yeah, that's a really good point you've just made there, Jason, which is that wealthy people do have much less stress. And in fact, all the data that I've seen suggests that if you want to die young, be at stress all the time. Like, it kills you.
Yeah, like, I mean, I wanted to dye my eyebrows today, but I didn't have time because I was doing work for this podcast. So I would look better if I had more money, and I did people subscribe to the Patreon and gave us loads of money, and then I would have more time.
It sounds like you're saying I would look better and have less stress if I didn't have to work on this fucking podcast.
No. I'd stop my other job. If you're listening, other job radio station, I didn't say that. But I'd stop my other job and just do this one because we're so rich from our Patreon bucks.
Yeah.
And then I'd be able to buy like really good eyebrow dye. And then, I would just laze about all day because I would have done all my editing in the week. And then I'd come to this podcast with beautiful eyebrows.
You want to improve the eyebrows, you want hair highlights, you want whatever it is, you just have to give us money and we will give it to Naomi.
And I wouldn't need to use any filters. I would just show everyone my mansion with my eyebrows.
So, the upper class shows off their fancy stuff. Like you say, the middle class is trying to emulate that. It's trying to move up and feel like, so the filters allow you to take what is...
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, perfectly reasonable, and just add those edges around it that makes it look a little bit more. Looks like I've got the filter on, so it looks like I did my makeup, and it with the highest quality, I don't know, sourced from the Amazon, probably killed 1,000 monkeys or something horrible. And that's got sort of a name to it. Emil Durkheim, great 19th century sociologist, one of my all-time faves. He wrote a book called Anomie, Anomie. But he was he was specifically looking at depression as it relates to suicide. Actually, I think the book is called Suicide, if I remember correctly. That he had identified that there's this phenomenon which only happens to the middle class. It only happens in industrialized nations. He didn't know that post-industrial nations would exist, but it's this idea that there's this growing disconnect between what you're striving for and what you have, and you have just enough to know what you don't have, and that it's not a problem for the working class because they don't know. They're working class. They have what they have. They have what's around them. And in fact, we see that in working class social media usage is usually much more locally focused. They're more interested in local businesses, local people, local events, neighborhoods, that kind of thing, than they are in more global trends. Whereas the middle class is like, "Ooh, I want to go on a 6-month trip across Asia. I may be shading someone's sister at this point. And I'm gonna have a nice relaxing time experiencing Southeast Asia and just getting out there."
She was
and
not
being one
relaxed like
with
she looked
nature.
in the pictures. She has schedules and timetables, and you don't see that on Instagram.
Exactly.
But isn't this also just indicative, Andrew, of the nature of how technology has provided more accessibility? The more you're aware of what is potentially out there that you don't have, the more that you want it. Whereas before, you might not have known just exactly the concept of rich, the concept of luxury. I'm sure there were anchor points, but there wasn't maybe as much constant stimulus to let you know exactly what you weren't experiencing.
Jason, you beautiful bastard. I'm so glad you mentioned technology.
I will say that I am actually born out of wedlock. I mean, born in wedlock. I'm not a bastard.
You're not a bastard. Thanks. Have you ever heard of a ruin folly?
No. I'm now thinking of like Follies, the dance number, and I'm also thinking of like ruin made me think of like Asgard, because just to put it out there, like the way that this is unrelated to anything.
And now for something completely unrelated.
You know, many people apparently think about the Roman Empire, and you're like,
Yes.
how often do you think of the Roman Empire? And lots of men were like, all the time. And I was like, what the fuck? I literally only think about it when I hear this question. I just don't get it. But ask me, how often do I think about Asgard?
Oh, how often do you think about Asgard?
I mean, probably at least once a day, multiple times a week for sure. So I'm all about the Shining City.
And how often do you think of Jotunheim?
Is this Lord of the Rings?
Gotcha.
And
No, this is Norse mythology / the comic book series Thor.
Okay, I was not in the chat.
To be fair, though, Jason, as soon as we get $350 a month in Patreon, I will do a, let's say 6-part, because you probably don't need any more than that, series on why people think about the Roman Empire.
Maybe after I listen to it, I might think about the Roman Empire all the time as well.
yeah, here's the thing, Naomi. Fuck the Roman Empire. I want you to learn about Loki. I want you to learn about Balder the Brave. I want you to learn about Lady Sif, the World Tree, Yggdrasil. Come on, the 9 realms.
Stop trying to make me a nerd. I feel like I know too much nerd stuff now from this podcast, and I can't go back, which is not something I ever signed up for. I signed up to learn history.
Ruin follies. So
I don't know what a ruin folly is. No.
You don't know what it is. It's fine. So a folly, in British architectural terms, a folly is a structure that you tend to put in your garden, which is to say yard. We would call it a yard in the States. They call it a garden in Britain. That is purely aesthetic. Its only job function is to be pretty.
A garden.
That's it. No, a structure, not an object. Like arches. Have you ever just seen like a useless archway in a garden before?
Well, I wouldn't say it's useless because it's pretty, but sure,
like,
yes, I get it.
It's not holding anything up. It's just an archway.
Yeah, it's not practical.
That's a folly. And that's where we can see the etymological connection to like follies as in comedy, dance, numbers. Like,
is there any connection there between like folly as a mistake though? Because you also would say that somebody's folly is to make an error, but this doesn't sound like an error. It just sounds like it is a focus on aesthetic over function.
Yeah, well, folly as an error does have a similar root in that it's just something that doesn't serve any purpose. That's it. That's really what we mean. You did something and it was useless. And that sort of evolved to mean error at this point in time because we live in a hyper-productive society that's like, if you do something for no reason, then it must be a mistake. So ruin follies actually emerge as a result of the Industrial Revolution. So just like you were saying about Instagram, ruin follies are this thing where we have all this new technology, and it has two major impacts. One, we get the emergence of the daily newspaper, which was a thing that it comes out of the 1750s, and then by the 1860s and 70s we have the like multiple editions a day. That increased the access to information, just as our digital technical revolution has, and a lot of stuff, like we start to see a lot of things like cookbooks emerge in this period, and like guides for the frugal housewife, and these publications that talk about daily life in a way that before the 1750s, before the Industrial Revolution, they exist in limited quantity. But like this is really when we start to kick up that image of what does a good life look like. There's a thing we talk about in like Tudor Britain. We call it the middling sort. Like if you've ever heard about guys like Thomas Cromwell, there are these people of relatively low birth standing, still of the artisan class, but not like a farmer. No peasant was rising, but they were able to sort of rise in power and have a great deal more influence despite their like relatively low status at birth. But the Industrial Revolution is when that really gets shaken up. The emergence of the nouveau riche, as the French would call it, the new rich. And suddenly, for the first time in European history, especially, there were people with more wealth, or more of the wealth was concentrated into the middle class than was in the upper class. So there are far more, there are these kind of crazy...
It's more like a bell curve distribution at this point.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bell curve distribution. Yeah, with like this middle class having, though, individuals who were wealthier in some instances than the crown in places like England. So there's so much more wealth concentrated into this middle class than there is into the upper class. This is the emergence of capitalism as a mainstay. Yeah, where it was possible to earn money and not have to have... I mean, it helps if you started with more money, but you didn't have to have money to start in order to move the way up.
Which I completely understand why that's attractive. I mean, all systems have positives and negatives. It's easy, given that we are living in sort of a really horrendous example of where capitalism can go, to just be like, capitalism bad, but also totally bad to live in a caste system where you are born completely limits your ability to experience the joys and successes of life and elements of freedom and upward social mobility and financial freedom. So like,
yeah,
I completely understand why core tenets of this system are extremely attractive and necessary, and at the time were massive improvements to where a lot of people were.
Yeah. And, you say things like, we just happen to have been born at the end of capitalism. Like at the beginning of capitalism, like most revolutions, it's a good system. But this is the natural progression. There's this guy called Marx you should read. But this is the natural progression of capitalism. Like it was always going to get to here. How long that took depends on like a lot of different factors. World War II kind of disrupted things. But we were just going to get here. But when it started, you're right. It sounded like a great option to break the caste system, to put an end to feudalism. But the British, particularly the British, but also the French systems, were rooted in that feudal structure. So like the House of Lords was the dominant body of Parliament until basically the 20th century, give or take. I forget which election it is. I think it's 1896 or something like that is when we start to see the shift in power from the House of Lords to the House of Commons, which is now where we get our prime minister and our cabinet and all that sort of thing from. But the House of Lords is a body that is appointed, or not by merit, by birth. Like you become... So for example, I have like a seventh cousin whose name is David Hope Johnstone, and he is the Earl of Annandale. And he gets a permanent seat on the House of Lords forever because his father did it, and his father did it, and then no one did it for 400 years, and then another guy named William Johnstone did it way back before the British Civil Wars broke out. So like, You have all the money in the world if you're in the middle class, but you have none of the power, which is really weird for us to think about.
It's very not American.
No, it doesn't match. And I don't think it matches the modern world at all. I don't think that's normal in most places. Now, money and power are inextricably linked. But that was not the case at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So if you are one of these factory owners or newspaper owners, or you're in the mercantile business, if you run a shipping business, you're just acquiring wealth and wealth and wealth, but your status remains fixed. You'll never be an earl. You'll never be a general, because back then military positions were handed out based on your family, not on your proven ability to be a good, effective commander. Gee, I wonder why the United States was able to defeat Britain in the War of Independence. So how do you manage to capture some of that feeling?
Power.
Some of that power. And you've already said it, Jason. You fake it till you make it, baby. Rich people from about 1750 till the first decade or so of the 20th century would build fake ruins on their property and pretend like they had a familial connection to a previous king or baron or duke. They would manufacture their own history.
Where I come from, we just call that fraud.
This is called Wimpole's Folly. So that looks like it's a castle ruin, right, Jason?
I mean, it's certainly a turret.
Could you describe it for the listeners who aren't watching this on video?
It looks like an aged and decrepit ruin of a turret. There are a number of crosses upon it. There are some windows and bars, and it's gray. It's stone.
Yeah.
It's only that, though. There is nothing else. There's like just enough of like a broken down wall next to it to make it feel like there might have been something more.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, what it looks like, too, because, this was built in like the 1820s or 30s. You would think, oh, well, that wall, that little segment of wall, it's got all this wear and tear on it. That's probably just because it's been around for a couple hundred years and like the weathering has made it look that way. But no, it was meant to look this way. It was
just
designed.
Scenic design.
Yeah, this is set designing. This is, you're trying to communicate this vibe that there used to stand here something, a castle or a great manor. They've cut the crosses. Those are bolt holes, or they're meant to be bolt holes, which is where like a crossbowman would put his weapon out. All of these pop up everywhere. They're so absolutely popular across the 19th century.
And did this work? Did this make people think that people were royals?
Sometimes, yeah. Because how are you going to fact check them? You can't like reverse, you can't image search. You can't take a photo with your phone of the ruin and be like, what's this?
I would not be able to lie that effectively as well. Like, someone comes around and sees your ruins and you have to like have a whole backstory. Be like, yes, my great grandfather. I can't even do it now. I wouldn't know what to say. That's crazy.
Yeah.
my gut though would be, I am surprised that there aren't historical records of royalty. You'd think of the one thing that people would actually keep very specific records, because people are very interested in maintaining power structures and not having them be lost or abused, is, oh no, this is actually a place of royalty and this is not.
So the missing context that you don't have, Jason, is a working knowledge of royalty in Britain over, since 1066. What happened then, Naomi?
Battle of Hastings. And I know that because of the advert that's like, 0800 1066, which is for an insurance company called Hastings. Direct. And I also should know that because I did do medieval history at A level, but it's the insurance company that's stuck in my head.
Correct. Hey, as long as you learn it, right? Nobody cares how.
I do.
But there's all of these civil wars and conflicts, the Wars of the Roses, the 100 Years' War, what we just simply call the British Civil Wars, that like you could reasonably be like, oh, well, my great-great-grandfather was like Arthur, son of Henry Tudor, who was supposed to be the next king, and actually he had a bastard with his maid or something, and that's how I became this connected individual that I am today.
Why don't they just pay people off? Like,
They
why,
did too.
I was about to be like, this just feels so much more work and effort than a classic payoff.
But you pay, okay, so they totally did. If there were a lot of like viscounts and barons who were falling on, like, with gambling debts especially, falling on hard times at this period, or they like, you know, invested in a venture to like, I don't know, go to Virginia and search for gold, and it like, there's no gold in Virginia, it didn't pay off, and they lost a lot of money. So you would totally pay them to like introduce you to the right people and to help back up your story. But you need that, like a good, there's so many real ruins in Britain. This becomes so popular. This is so popular. So many ruins are built all across the UK, especially. The UK, it is lousy with ruin follies.
What a weird grift. I just have to point that out. What a weird grift.
But it's just how important class was to the power structure. It didn't matter how wealthy you were. If you couldn't, like, say my great-great-granddaddy bled at Bannockburn with the Bruce or something, like, you just didn't have the cachet. You just weren't one of the cool kids. So you made it up. You faked it. You built the ruins. You bribed people to vouch for you. Like, you constructed an image of lineage that just wasn't real. It's just something you came up with. And that
is your long-term point that basically pretend castle ruins was the original social media?
Sort of. We'll get to that in a second. That's part of it. So that is part of it. There is this, you pointed to the technology being the thing that has made these filters and this class distinction.
But also influencers, right? The idea that the image of something creates the reality, the perception is reality, and therefore people are creating this perception of themselves as nobility and get access to the noble class. And now people, you know, in whatever way, shape, or form, create the perception of themselves as something online, whether it's accurate or not, and then become experts in it or invited into those circles.
So the royals, the original influencer, are they Kim Kardashian?
Yes. Yes, the House of Saxe-Coburg is the original house of the Kardashians.
And they all had castles, like Kim Kardashian has a big bum. And so all of them had to get big castles, and like everyone had to get BBLs. Is that not a good connection?
First of all, Queen Victoria had a huge ass, so let's talk about how that's a part of it.
But I don't think people could get BBLs back then. Maybe they would have.
But that's what the hoop skirts were for.
Oh, so they were getting fake BBLs. Oh my god,
I'm were.
Right.
Yeah, Jason, you have successfully summarized what is my most well-received, well-loved, well-remembered lecture I've been giving for the better part of 10 years now, which is that the fake it till you make it thing isn't new. The difference is just that, yeah, we have more people engaged in Instagram filters than we do in ruin follies, but it's the same impulse. There's still that Durkheimian enemy at play, the interest in at least the perception of having upward mobility, even if you don't necessarily have it. It has not left us, but it's been around for hundreds of years.
And how well known are these ruin follies? Because, like, I mean, I spent a childhood going to what we called low walls, which was my dad just taking me to, like, 1 centimetre high walls and saying it was history. But, like, is there many people going to visit these sites thinking that they are ancient?
Yes. Here's a map. I've got a map on the YouTube, but here's a map, Naomi, of a park in the east of England, which is just a park of ruin follies. You can go on a historical tour of fake history that people love. It's a selfie destination. People get so excited about the architecture and everything behind it, such that today, a full quarter of the ruin follies that still stand are in Heritage England's Registry of Historic Places.
That's crazy.
The fake ruins, Wimple's Folly, the turret, is a grade 2 historic building registered in Historic England. It was in one of the episodes of season 1 of Slow Horses. They even talk about this if you're any Apple TV Plus fans out there. Like, they have become historical. They have become things that we now look back on with awe in the thing they tried to do. They literally faked it until they made it.
Isn't that the nature of anything that lasts long enough? You know, if anything sticks around long enough, it kind of becomes historical.
That's what I was going to say. Do they think it's like, is it historical because people made it in the past as ruin folly? Or do they think, you know, the thing they're trying to replicate, like they're trying to replicate this like medieval royal property? Do Heritage England think that it's a medieval royal property?
No. They don't think that it's a medieval property. Although there is an issue of sussing this out. There is actually an estimate that as many as 5 or 6% of actual ruins may be ruin follies in England and Scotland. But you're right that with Wimple's Folly, with this Folly Park, they are historic for their folliness. Like, they are documenting this thing that I just explained to you.
Yeah. Because ultimately they still created something that is visually interesting and beautiful and on its own merit is worthwhile for people to go, even if it's not pretending to be the thing that it was.
Yes. And that brings us back to filters. Because as Naomi already noted, TikTok automatically filters images and video with TikTok's so-called beauty filters, air quotes, which slim down the chin a bit and like raise the cheekbones, maybe fill the eyebrows out. They go through this filtering to create the illusion that the person who is making a video fits an imagined standard of beauty that TikTok has established.
So first off, I hate that. Secondly, I did not know that existed. I had no idea.
Yeah, let me just show you a quick example so that you can see it. And
it's interesting because the beauty filter, the just general beauty filter, is just the automatic thing that your camera goes on. Oh, that's the bold. Is that bold glamour? I don't know. Yeah, so this is like the new AI one they brought out.
But you can't turn it off?
This one you choose to use, but there's one where you just go onto your camera, and the first thing that comes up, just like going into your camera app, is your face with this beauty filter on, and you can choose to turn it off, but that's the automatic thing that it has. And like, I remember opening up my TikTok camera and being like, oh my God, I look really odd. But interestingly, Samsung as well, my mum told me that they were doing something similar with your camera, where they sort of edit you a bit. And I was like, that's why it always looked a lot better on that particular camera, which is really odd. But TikTok, if you use these bold glamour ones and stuff, they now have a little stamp that says you're using it, but they don't have that for the general beauty filter.
The beauty filter of TikTok is based on an amalgamation of popular filters used manually by users. So again, the slimming, the darkening of the skin, the bolding of the eye, all these sort of things are basically the TikTok algorithm going, what's popular? And then saying, we're going to make everyone seem a little bit more popular.
I just really find it disheartening that A, that's the fundamental setting, and B, like what that does to people's self-image and the inherent idea that you are not good enough, that no matter who you are, you need to use a filter, particularly to make yourself beautiful. There's just so much about both the language and the concept that I find really disconcerting and sort of disgusting. So
yeah, there's like this influencer who I watched for like quite a long time, and she said, you always compliment me on my skin and how great my skin is, and most of her comments are like, what's your skincare routine, da, da, da. And she took the filter off, and she's actually got really bad acne, and like all of her she's got a lot of scarring and pitted skin and stuff, and she was like, I'm just not confident enough to go on this app with that, so I'm just using a filter. But it's so realistic that everyone thought it was her skin because of the AI now. It doesn't glitch when you put your hand over it. Like, nothing glitches about it.
But also how sad may not be the right word, but there's a version of that where, okay, this person's putting up this content, and what they're getting complimented on is something that they fundamentally know isn't even true to themselves. Everything that they do is talking about how they cook fish. I don't know what it is. And what they're actually getting responses on is how great your skin looks, which only reinforces to them that that's not something that I actually have. My skin is scarred, or my skin has blemishes. My skin is human. And this is all I'm getting complimented on. I can never share my real self. This is what people find of value about me, and it is all built on a mirage. That can be just as devastating for the person who's putting it out there as it is in terms of setting the image up to impressionable people who are watching, because it's basically telling the story that what makes you of value isn't real. That's really damaging.
Do you know, like, this is what I was having this chat with my housemate literally yesterday about how I don't compliment people when they've lost weight anymore, because whenever I've lost weight, whether knowingly or not, and people have said, wow, you really look like you've lost weight, I then think, when I gain weight again, oh, they're monitoring me.
Yeah.
You know, they're noticing that thing about me that I'm conscious of. And they always say, oh, no one cares about your weight, da da da. But then people are watching, and people are saying, you, even if it's a compliment, like with the girl with her skin, they're saying your skin looks great, but it's actually just reinforcing that everyone's looking at her skin all the time. So when her skin doesn't look great,
yes,
you know,
and the data bears that out, Naomi.
Like a skincare influencer, if you're telling her her skin looks good when she's been on a journey to make her skin look good, great.
Yes,
but maybe someone, as you say, who just makes fish all day, don't know why that's the example. And then there's people are constantly like, your skin looks good, and it turns out they actually had a filter on.
Here's the reason why that's an example.
And now for something completely unrelated.
I spend way too much time on social media, but a lot of it, I think, is unproductive, negative time.
Yeah, you're just watching people cut fish up all day.
But I was about to say, but there's a very few channels that I'm like, no, this is actual quality time for me. There's a man on the internet who just sits by the Chesapeake Bay and talks about the fish he catches and eats. And awesome. It's great. It's great.
Please send me that link.
I will. He's a million subscribers. He's on a goal to eat every kind of crab. He's on a goal to eat every kind of oyster. He's going through all the fish at Aldi's to be like, which is good, which is bad at like cheap prices. I got a lobster fisherman I follow. I got a crab fisherman I follow. So I only really look at action figures and
fish.
People eating seafood on Instagram.
Wait till you get onto rug cleaning. That's where things get really fun.
Oh, power washing and rug cleaning.
Oh, what
rug cleaning Instagram. It truly is. There's something for everybody.
So, in a survey conducted by actual teenagers, this is my favorite. This is from something called QLS Roar, which is like a high school newspaper collective, basically, in the United States, where like teenage journalists like do research and write articles and things. Is really interesting, and I support them entirely. But they took surveys of like hundreds and I think it was several thousand teenagers about their relationship with these filters and how the filters impact reality. So just like the ruin follies have become ruins and historical monuments themselves, the filters are bleeding into the real world, right? So surveyed, about half of all women under the age of 18 would say that they rate themselves unfavorably compared to the images they see on social media. About a third of all men under the age of 18 say that they rate themselves as unfavorably, with another quarter of both saying they kind of go back and forth on it. So sometimes yes, sometimes no, depending on that particular day. And when you go through like the impact of selfies, the minimum number of likes a selfie has to get before most people think that they have taken a good selfie and are worth it is 21.
Yeah.
More than half, 55% of people require a minimum of 21 likes, with more than a quarter of people saying that 60 likes or more is the minimum threshold they need to hit before they're like, that was a good selfie, I look good enough.
Yeah, if I get below 30, I take it down.
This is madness to me.
I think the only time I've gotten more than 30 responses on a post I've made in a long time is I got a new job. Like,
I think that's the same for me.
When I knew I'd put a good selfie up was 3 people who ghosted me, going back to the dating, messaged me. And I thought, oh, that's a good selfie. That's
that's a
God
pretty
damn,
good.
that's a good selfie.
That's a good
And I got
metric,
invited to
though.
a
That's
party
real.
by someone who ghosted me after I posted this selfie. I got some
That is
weird
a good selfie.
messages.
That does remind me of the song #selfie, which is definitely about exactly that.
21 likes is like, that's just a sad statement about reality. 3 dudes who ghosted you immediately reaching out. That's a banger. I mean, like, that's you.
It's never happened again.
No,
it was a one-time.
That's a
thing.
valuable metric. That's real.
Yeah.
Like,
Also, more than half of all respondents said that they spend 5 minutes or more tweaking an image before they post it, like adding filters, checking them, maybe editing things out. And that has, again, it's bled into reality, with 86% of respondents saying that the images they were seeing through filters had a negative impact on their mental health, and they had to unfollow or mute a person's account as a result. With that coming through in an explosion of fitness and diet books and routines that are meant to give you that filter look, makeup tutorials meant to give you that filter look, and also things like the drive for size. It's a big thing for teenage and adolescent boys aged 10 to 15. The drive for size is what we're calling this phenomenon, where 11-year-old boys, Jason, are trying to get six-pack abs. I got really angry about this. But
it is crazy for me, given that so much of my life is centered around superheroes and professional wrestling, that I still look like this.
You look like, I mean, I think I used to say,
I mean, I look like a wrestling and comic book fan. I don't look like...
No, but you look like a wrestler, or as I say, you look like Hank McCoy before the second mutation, when he wasn't blue. When he was just a big guy.
He was no. I look like a man who has a podcast and wears black t-shirts. I'm very aware of where I fall in the cultural pecking order. But
Cole Rise, when he came up with the filters for Instagram, wanted to give people the opportunity to do this really highly specialized thing that you had to be quite wealthy to be involved in, of doing filtering and lenses and whatnot. And it lent the middle class the opportunity to try something that they previously didn't have access to, and to project a more idealized version of the life they were living. And similarly, that's what the Ruin Follies were, a bunch of middle class people trying to project the wealth through this fakery. But in both cases, they've become reality. The impact they've had well beyond the bounds of their intended their intended systems, has had really substantial impacts on, in the case of the Follies, our heritage industry, but in the case of Instagram, possibly on some more serious issues.
Because we as people are drawn to the grass is always greener, I am likely not good enough, and I always want more. I mean, we are hungry creatures, both literally and metaphorically, and I think that there is so much that we don't recognize, that we were not built to take in this much information from this many people and these many opinions without consciously deciding to do so.
Do you know what my takeaway actually is, though, coming from the young generation perspective? I do think there is like a lot of hate around social media and it's like negativity, but like I've always thought that there's always something new in history that is aspirational and that maybe is negatively impacting people's mental health. Like these people wanting to be royal and feeling like they can't be part of society because they're new money. Like there's always been things that people have been scared of that are new technology, like electricity happening, or do you know what I mean? Like, for example, AI, like all of my students, I teach editing, are like, oh, but AI is going to make our job obsolete. It's like, it won't, it will just make it faster. And you have to sometimes lean into this new stuff and think there was a point where people were cutting up film and sticking it together. And now we can do it at home on software that's affordable. But that's going to move forward now where it will become so quick that now we can do other interesting things with that edit. It won't stop us editing. It will just bring it into a new era. Yes. And although there's lots of negative things, there is also just that this is the progression of history and that there is always something we're worried about with the younger generation, if that makes sense.
Socrates famously said that books were bad, the written word was bad because it would ruin the art of conversation. That this has been a repeating argument. And like, I often think the way that you've just presented it. And then other times I think, no, I just want to hide in my 2007 cave.
I don't think it's, I think for me, fundamentally, it's not a fear of the technology. It's a fear of the people who are responsible for our well-being.
Well, that's fair.
And I think for me, it's not like social media is It's exactly right. Social media is not inherently bad. There's a lot of positives that are potentially there for it. The television isn't inherently bad. And it's all tools. But the way I don't have faith that the structures that are there to help protect us as a society, not just as individuals, but as a people that are there to research and understand the effects and modulate it, not to limit our rugged individualism, but to understand the potentially unintended consequences. Because through history, I have seen constantly people wanting to amass power, and that this particular form of technology, this particular medium, has such incredible influence on how people think and feel and the ability to allow themselves to be manipulated without realizing that they're being manipulated, and for certain people to consolidate power. That is, I think, to me, the issue.
You thought you didn't have anything to say about Instagram.
Oh, I have lots of things to say about Instagram. I just don't have much to hear about it. Things that I learned today. I had no idea that TikTok had a standard beauty filter. It doesn't surprise me that TikTok has a filter, but I did not know that it was the standard. You have to turn it off rather than opt in. I find that insidious, and that is really, really frustrating. Like, that was a point of genuine anger for me over the course of this episode, which doesn't necessarily always happen. Sometimes it's just like, wow, but that really rubs me the wrong way. And a more fun thing, I had no idea about the concept of ruin follies, and I love this as a grift. I love the fact that someone had the thought that, okay, in order to get into society, I will pay people to scenic design and build entire castle ruins in my backyard, if only to prove that I can be a part of the House of Lords. And then not only did one person have that idea, in a time before social media, in a time before the internet, it spread like wildfire, and now there are entire parks full of these ruin follies. That's incredible. That's carny in a way that I can appreciate. Like, that's pro wrestler level carny. And so one thing made me upset and one thing charms me. Naomi, anything you particularly learned or took away from today's episode before we wrap up?
I just realised how maybe different my perception is as a Gen Zer to this topic. I feel like this is one of the first episodes we've done where I'm like, I'm there. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I really grew up with it, and I don't really know what it's like to not have Instagram and filters. I don't know. I couldn't remember much before them. So yeah, that's been interesting to maybe hear some other perspectives on social media and how you guys feel about it. And I don't have to go see ruins anymore because they're probably all fake anyway. So shut up, Dad.
Thank you all so much for listening to Seemingly Unrelated or watching Seemingly Unrelated. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. That would be, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Please, 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 if you enjoy the show, like, subscribe, leave a review. Not only does it make us feel good, it really helps these damnable algorithms. They might be the bane of our existence, but we also live in a society and we have to play by those rules. And the more that you share, the more that you interact, the more that you comment, and the more that you just tell your friends, the more people will listen to the show. We're on Patreon for $2 a month. You get a bonus episode. Sometimes we talk about Christmas. Sometimes we talk about sharks. Basically, it is a free-for-all, except it's really $2 for all, which is almost free. I mean, really, it's effectively free for all at only $2. Andrew, anything you want to plug?
If you go to my personal website, andrewjohnstonedidymus.com, you can find everything that I'm up to. You can find links to this podcast, the research I'm doing, the teaching I'm doing, any upcoming events I might be at. You could catch me at the UK Ireland Digital Humanities Conference in June in Glasgow. Why would you? I don't know, but I'll be there. So yeah, andrewjohnstonedidymus.com.
Naomi.
Just go look at our Instagram because I'm going to start trying to make some clips for it with my terrible knowledge of video editing, which I'm now learning through doing this. And I think I've come up with a pretty funny one. So, I mean, go check out our Instagram. Not to big myself, it only took me about 4 hours. But go have a look at our Instagram. We've got some more content going up there.
As I mentioned, am a creative consultant. So I'm a writer, director, and producer. So if you are interested in working with me in any of those capacities, seeing more of my work, checking out some samples, I have a portfolio website that is in development. But right now you can go and find me at Jason Howard on LinkedIn, where there is video samples. There's lots of stuff. I post a creative roundup every Monday of stuff that I've done, including Seemingly Unrelated. I would love to work with you, and I am interested and available. We really appreciate you being a part of our seemingly unrelated journey. Who knows where we will go next week? The answer is Andrew and Naomi, but not me, and not you until you get there. So hop on board. Let's go.
Choo-choo.
Bye.
Bye.
Seemingly Unrelated is a Life's Little Murder Boards production. Created and hosted by Andrew Johnstone and Jason Howard. Audio production and editing services provided by Naomi Cohn. Our artwork is by Megan Zemet. The theme song is Irizumi by Pistol Jazz. To find out more about everyone involved and access the show notes for this episode, visit us at seeminglyunrelatedpod.com.